to today's webinar, Strategies for Change, Mastering Change Management for Rapid Results. We'll be exploring key principles and best practices for implementing effective change management, focusing on minimizing resistance, ensuring smooth transitions, and maximizing the ROI of new technologies. I'm with Jennifer White at the MJW Group and Sriram Rajagopalan at Inflectra, and we're going to dive into some proven frameworks and real-life examples showing how change management can make or break critical initiatives like system implementations. To give a brief outline of what we're going to discuss today, I'll shortly hand it off to Jennifer and Sriram to introduce themselves, but we'll talk a little bit about what change management is and the importance of it. We'll talk about some different frameworks for change management, as well as an effective change management plan. And then we'll go into some concrete examples of change management and then wrap it up with some discussion on how ALM tools wrap into this. So with that being said, I will go ahead and pass it off to Jennifer to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Jennifer White, CEO of the MJW Group, and we are an operations management consulting firm. We help enhance operational efficiency and leadership capabilities while delivering significant time and cost savings for organizations. So a lot of the work that we do stem around project management and program management and ensuring that projects meet the end goal and get delivered to the finish line. So there's a lot of change management that we do in our practice. As you can imagine, when you're delivering projects, you have all facets of personalities on the team, as well as different roles and responsibilities, and different teams have to come together to deliver those in projects. So we deal with change management in a lot of aspects when it comes to user adoption or resistance to change. So my background is industrial engineering. I'm also an MBA, and I've been in business now for 7 years. I love all things supply chain, very in tune with supply chain analytics and the supply chain and operations IT applications as well. I've been married for 15 years, and my husband and I do run the MJW Group together. So I'm glad to be here talking about change management with Inflectra. We became a solutions partner of Inflectra last year in 2023. And we've been working with Inflectra to help our clients and potential clients realize the value of the tools of Inflectra in their suite.
My name is Dr. Sriram Rajagopalan. I have my organizational leadership in project management, doctoral qualifications there, MBA in management, computer engineering, and stuff like that. But I have continuously worked with multiple clients in different industries, and Inflectra was a client of mine once, and I then consulted, and I have then trained, and now I'm an employee as well. So it's been a long, wonderful, exciting journey for me. I have experience in multiple industries like banking, finance, investment, insurance, and many things that you can see. I won't read the entire list here. I am also founder and president of Agile Training Champion, through which I try to make a difference in the world, training people for project management, program management, portfolio management, and many other things, among being a mentor and stuff like that. Fun fact about me is I'm also a theatrical actor. And I do a lot of acting and then try to bring project management and agile principles right there as well, in backstage coordination and stuff like that. Married for 25 years with 2 boys, taller than me they are now. But also, I have received the Eric Janet Project Management Excellence Award, Kersner Award. I'm a published author. 1 book is already out. The 2nd book is expected to be coming out very soon. Recognized in who's who, and serving in many capacities, in many different ways, just making a difference in people's life.
Just to kick off our discussion, I'd love to kind of dive into what is change management. So we'll kind of start off, maybe Jennifer, you can kick us off. Can you define, what change management means in the context of modern organizations, specifically with, rapid technological advancements as well?
Yeah, sure thing. Change management in the modern workspace right now is essentially a smooth transition between a current state, whatever that looks like when it comes to, technology, processes, et cetera, into the future state. So I like to look at this green arrow that we have here with, two ends on both ends of the spectrum there, because that transition is what change management overall encompasses. We want to ensure a smooth transition when we're preparing, planning, implementing, and monitoring changes in an overall change or transformation of an initiative, right? And so our goal is to minimize disruption, enhance employee buy-in, maximize efficiency, and then mitigate risk as much as possible. So there's a couple of elements that are involved with change management that we've highlighted here when it comes to the scope, the goal of change management, the time frame, and who facilitates that. So typically you may have project managers, at times you may have a change manager that is overseeing the strategic initiative. But overall, we're all working together to ensure the organization can adapt to the changing environment that's at hand.
Sriram, do you have any additional thoughts on, what is change management?
Definitely. As Jennifer very rightly said, change is about moving from a current state or as-is state to a future state, which is a to-be state. It's more about the vision. In my humble opinion, change is more about a response to a risk or an issue. As many of you know, risk is nothing but having a probability of occurrence with a positive or negative impact potentially. And then when it comes to issues are risks that have materialized. And in today's modern organization, change is much more internal to the organization. At the same time, it's also external to the organization. So when you look at the modern organizations, they are not just focused on delivering a unique product, service, or a service, which is what projects are, but they are also looking at how do I make a change in the world through the organization? So change becomes a vehicle through which I am internalizing benefits for the organization as well as value for the customer. So the entire value chain thought process comes into play over here. And as you mentioned, supply chain, the thought process comes into play here very well. And so when you're looking at the modern organization, the focus is looking at physical and mental state of employees in the organization, the lifetime value of the customer in that thing, global environmental protection, and what are the things that are happening in the world that I don't know about, and that's the risk. And if I don't do that, then I'm going to lose the opportunities. So the whole concept of SWOT and all those things come into play when you move from current state to future state. And although we have done as clean as possible to say scope, goal, time frame, and facilitators over here, change is an organization-wide initiative. And in my doctoral thesis, I basically said project management should be translated into change management, because project managers are nothing but a vehicle for change. They are introducing change. And when you move into program and portfolio management, they are all, getting more magnified and stuff like that. So that is the focus. Modern organizations are not just technology savvy alone. They are also looking at, why do I exist as a company in the whole world ecosystem? So there's a lot more to think in terms of what the modern organization is, and then internalize the change and then implement the change.
And I think both of your responses also get at kind of the why is change management important, which is kind of our next mode of discussion. I mean, obviously, mitigating risks and factoring in how people would transition during certain technological changes is a very important reason why change management is important, to make sure that it's a more seamless process. But I'd love to know from you guys, what really are the key aspects of why change management is important to organizations?
Yeah, so as you kind of noted already, Audrey, the minimizing resistance, ensuring a smooth path forward. Communicating change is not as simple as it sounds, as I'm saying it. When you have many people involved in initiatives and projects, they may not all have the same end goal. They have their little slice of the pie that they're marching towards, but the PMs and the change managers and sometimes leadership have a broader perspective, like Dr. Sriram was mentioning, with, what are we trying to achieve? Why are we here? How does this add value to our external customers and even internal customers when it comes to employees or other key stakeholders involved. So they're always looking at the ROI and how we can reduce the risk that we may be subjected to when implementing a huge initiative in an organization. So it's extremely important that we look at these aspects again to ensure that the organization as a whole can adapt to the change that's happening. It's not as easy, like I said, communicating change. We all hear it, but actually going through the execution of it and ensuring everyone can adapt to what's happening, that's the challenging part that comes into play.
Yeah, and I think all of the points you made are really great. And I think now the question is kind of how do organizations get there? So I'm going to move on to the next slide. There are obviously a lot of different methods and frameworks by which change management can occur. And for example, here on the screen, we have the Kotter and then the ADKAR models. And Sriram, I was wondering if you could explain the main differences between these two models and when each might be most effective, depending on the situation.
So since we are talking about frameworks, I just want to set the context a little bit clear so that people understand what the ADKAR and this Kotter model is. When you are looking at the as-is state to the to-be state, or the present state to the future state, however you call it, when that vision is going to be executed, we need to look into two important elements. One is going to be the strategy, the other one is going to be the execution. So which angle are you coming from? Are you looking at it from strategy to execution or execution to strategy? So the model that you are going to pick is going to be based upon that particular aspect. And regardless of which model you are going to pick, you need to understand there are three important stages. And in one of the slides earlier, we talked about transition, and change management is focusing a lot more on transition. Transition from what? And we talked about this, the as-is to the future. So the as-is state sometimes is called, we need to stop doing so that we can move to the future state, which is stop doing. And different models call them differently. One calls the Lewin's model, which is another popular model, is basically saying unfreeze the old ways of working, transition, and then move into the new ways of working. And different people would Bridges model is going to basically come back, say, end what you are doing, go into a neutral zone where we are going to do all this work, and then start with the beginning of how we are going to be moving forward in the future. So there are different models that come into play. Now, I told about the strategy and execution, right? So when you take a look at the strategy is more from top down, like, the companies are moving into a new responding to a new event, like the wars that are happening, the global pandemic that happened. These are major external stimuli that changes the way we work. Does not necessarily mean that we are going to do something else completely different. Tesla is no longer going to go and say we're going to stop making cars and we're going to go and create the vaccine for pandemic, right? COVID. We're not going to do that, but we have to adopt to a new way of working, remote work possibilities, having access to remote capabilities and stuff like that. So that's the thought process behind this when you look at a strategy. So from that particular angle, Kotter's model is looking at the steps as to how you are going to respond to this, like mergers, acquisitions, spin-off arrangements, global market expansion, global product expansion, strategic partnership alliances. When you take a look at this, we need to create a sense of urgency. The first stage, the four models, the steps that we have, the create, sense of urgency, the second step, third, and fourth, are all grouped into one thing. That is about strategy. Now, creating a sense of urgency. If we don't do this, we are going to, eliminate ourselves from competition and stuff like that. So that is creating a sense of urgency. And having the sense of urgency isn't good when you don't have those ambassadors who will carry that message forward. Across the entire organization. That's forming your guiding coalition. Like, who are going to be my people that will actually work with this? And they all have to be on the same page. If different people are going to say different things, then, it only creates confusion rather than, consensus. So how do I make sure that I have a consistent vision for everybody to actually move forward with? And this is what you see as a business case, a program charter, or a project charter, and all those things when we talk about this. And what are some of the strategies by which we are going to unleash this? This is when the portfolio management, program management, project management, product management, operational considerations, all those things come into fold. And now you need to communicate that change. Like, this is what we are going to do. That means you are telling, from the current state, like in 3 years from now, we are going to have this capability. In 1 year, we will be able to accomplish these things. And that creates that high level roadmap. And that's your first stage of strategy. Now turn it into the next stage, which is about, how do I get into the execution model? So how do I remove the barriers so that people are enabled to the action, to do the work? And when they are doing this, create those, motivate them with short-term wins, like, give them the thumbs up and, motivate them with internal and external thought processes and stuff like that. And then you are building on the change. Okay, now that we have proved something, how can we make sure that this is continuing? And so you are creating those small bubbles of those change model so that you are able to go to the last stage, which is making this changes stick. And when those changes stick, it comes back to the same thing of creating a sense of urgency, because that could create a new product, a new operational way of doing work, a new way of doing something in a different country or different product and stuff like that. Now that is going to be from a high level to the low level, so from strategy to execution. But when you look at the ADKAR model, which is from Hyatt, it's part of Prosky. ADKAR is one component of a Prosky model, and it talks about from individuals to the team to the organization. So it's bottom-up thought process. Like, I need to realize that there is going to be a change that's happening. Example, artificial intelligence. Now that's going to change the world. And if I sit and I let the whole world pass before me, then at some point in time, I'm eliminating myself from being able to compete equally or with my peers and stuff like that. So that's an awareness of change. Now that I know this, how do I create a desire? I have to actually do some action, right? That is participating in the change. And then when you are doing these things, you are going to create the knowledge. Okay, now that I have created the knowledge, what do I do? And that goes into the ability of how do I make sure that other people around me are going to follow this? Because if I'm the only person who is making all these things and everybody else is not doing it, then I'm alone, right? So I want the whole organization to move. So that is going to be the ability. And as you do that, there'll be resistance, there'll be confusion, there'll be questions and all those things. And now you are trying to do, how do I sustain this? And both models are really important. You cannot say, I don't want Kotter model, I will only go with ADKAR, or I will only go with ADKAR and I won't be able to do this Kotter model. I'll give you a quick example. AWS. Nobody at the very top came and said, oh, we have to create cloud. We have to have all these EC2 machines and S3 buckets, all those things available on the cloud. It was a couple of quick engineers that said, like, hey, we could do something different. And that is the thought process that went ahead. If you look at all the different things like the Xbox and all those things, there are going to be something that is going to be generating from the bottom up and something that are going to come from the top down. Both are important. So if you take ADKAR plays into the first 4 stages of the strategy in Kotter model. ADKAR plays into the second 4 stages, like 5th to 8th, in the execution angle. So are you focused on strategy? Are you focused on execution? In that both cases, ADKAR becomes another lens through which you see the change. So both cannot be diverse. Both has to be seen together because they are 2 eyes of the same face.
That is really interesting. So it seems like organizations can use both types of frameworks depending on the situation that they're in.
Right, absolutely. Because if I use my right eye to see the world, or my left eye to see the world, I'm still seeing the world. So which model you see is still going to be the world. The change management, the results that you are seeing is what you are trying to implement through either one of these models.
Jennifer, do you have a preferred framework that you work with, or is it a little bit of both as well? It seems like there's a lot more as well. Is there 5 or 7 different types of frameworks? Maybe even more, I'm not sure.
Yes, there are at least 7 different models that are available. I gave you like 4 already. Lewin's is one, Bridges is one, 7S model is one, and there are some, many other models that exist.
All right. Yeah, we use a mixture of a lot of models. It depends on the organization, like Dr. Sriram is saying. Every organization has a different style of how they manage change, how they introduce it, into their organization and how they maintain it, the change going forward. So there's different ways to start it, there's different ways to manage through it, and then there's different ways to kind of lead once the change has taken effect and you hand it over, to another department to kind of manage, and usually it's operations or production, right, to manage from there. So yeah, we do use a mixture of these models when we are implementing and leading change.
Excellent. Yes. When you are, coming up with an effective change management plan, what are the critical factors? I'll move on to the next slide here.
Yeah.
What are some of the critical factors to consider when developing this plan, specifically for organizations looking to adopt new technologies? Maybe Jennifer, if you want to kick us off.
Sure, yeah. So as we mentioned in the previous slide, like we have to define what the scope of the change is, right? We have to figure out a way to communicate and articulate what it is for people to even get grab hold of it and get buy-in from them. So step one is defining what that scope is so everyone is aware. Step two, I would say, is identifying those key stakeholders. Now, stakeholders come in all shapes or sizes. It could be someone who's been doing a process for 30 years, but the process is in their head. Guess what? They're a key stakeholder if the process isn't written down anywhere, or that knowledge hasn't been transferred to other people in other departments or other teams. So identifying those key stakeholders, it could be all the way up to a leadership level where you have a champion for the project, all the way down to a user, if it's a new system that you're implementing, a user or someone, like I said, who's very familiar with the process in and out. So key stakeholders are very important when you're developing a change management plan. Also, you want to make sure everyone has a voice that needs to have a voice. So that's why it's very important to make sure they're included early on in the project before you get too deep into it. Of course, as a PM, we're going to assign responsibilities to those involved in the project. That way, when we develop the timeline, right, the timeline meshes well with who's doing what. Everyone understands their role that they're playing, and the PM has a better time of managing the schedule and being able to communicate any changes or deviations away from that schedule to key stakeholders. Of course, creating a budget is important with a change management plan, because in project management, budgeting is one of the key aspects of making sure we stay on track. Most organizations do create a budget for a change management initiative, because they do realize that it's affecting their personnel. It's affecting processes that may need to be developed. It's also affecting data that is probably not really mined or cleansed the way that it needs to be, or new data is introduced and we have to start adhering to that data or really making it visible some kind of way. So then there's also technological budget as well. If you need to integrate systems so the data can be visible, or systems need to talk to one another, right, to transform and migrate the data itself. So there is budgeting that is involved to make sure the change management plan stays on track.
Mhm.
And of course, this megaphone here with communicating the change, right? That's so important to have. I like to call it a rah-rah, right, with everyone involved, just to get them, it's kind of like a pep rally, to kind of get them amped and fired up about the change, because it is hard, as I mentioned in the beginning, to actually execute change. It's fun communicating the change, but when we get into the nitty-gritty and, the days get long and, everyone starts to get a little burned out, right, we have to make sure we keep the cadence and everyone still with that same fire and desire to carry out the change. So that's where some of your stakeholders, they will become those champions to really guide the team through that exercise. One thing I did include on here is providing training and support. So I know sometimes this step gets missed when we're implementing change because we just assume that, people naturally will adopt and just, go with the flow and do what they need and kind of muscle through to figure things out. But sometimes we need to take a step back and allow time for the user adoption to organically transpire with any change. So think of, if it's a new application that's being introduced to an organization, right? If I used to turn the widget like 30 different times with 30 buttons, and now I can do it in 5, repetitions with 5 buttons, that's a major change that someone has to like mentally adopt and realize, hey, I have lesser steps now, so I don't have to do what I was doing before. And I actually can save time. So now I can introduce other value adds into the process here. So I think it's important to make sure we take a step back, allow for training, allow for support and Q&A as far as questions to be asked of the team to make sure they have what they really need and they feel very supported. And then, of course, measuring success, right? We're here. We talked about ROI on one of the other slides, right? It's very important to leadership as owners of the change initiative here to understand, how did this change materialize? What does it equate to? Is it a cost savings? Is it a time savings? Are we more productive as an organization? Are we more visible as an organization? Do our customers naturally gravitate to us now because of this change, right? You want to be able to quantify what that success ends up being as far as results with the change management plan, and make sure it's communicated effectively to everyone involved.
Yes, these definitely, all these steps seem like they all have a crucial element to play in the whole change management process. And maybe we can go back and talk a little bit about some specific stages. So, for example, the stakeholder management piece of it is obviously a very crucial element to change management. Do you have any tips or advice that you could provide for how organizations can effectively identify and engage those stakeholders to ensure a smooth transition during a change?
Yeah, I would say start out by mapping who those potential stakeholders are. I alluded to, it could be, someone very high level in leadership role. It could be someone, an end user or someone that is very familiar with the process that we are changing. You want to make sure you keep them engaged and they understand what's going on at all times throughout the change that's happening. And a lot of times we do this through surveys and interviews, right? There's usually time set aside in the project schedule for data observations, data collection, and to interview people just to understand, what has happened in the current state. Where are we? What do they think the future state would look like from their perspective? And as we start to put all of that together, that's how the future state blossoms and it originates, right? With everyone's input from it. So developing a comprehensive communication plan to keep all of the stakeholders informed, involved. Like I said before, providing that training and support to help them adopt to the change. That's going to help you monitor this feedback from the stakeholders, and then keeping them engaged and addressing their concerns all throughout the change is key as well, not only for the project team to build rapport with everyone on the project, but also making the stakeholders feel like they're very supported through the change, and we can ensure that they have a smooth transition.
It absolutely seems like communication through the whole process is definitely key, as well as training. And
Yeah.
so, Shriram, maybe you can share some examples of how early and effective communication throughout the change management process can reduce resistance during a project.
Definitely, definitely. So when you look at the keyword resistance, it means people are unwilling to immediately buy into what your thought process is. And if you don't address them early on and at frequent points, consistently and continuously, conflicts brew, right? So if you look at that concept behind that, you want to make sure that the resistance does not become a breeding ground for conflicts to continuously emerge, disrupt, and things like that. Because if you have a disagreement with one individual and you address that early on, problem solved most of the time. But if you don't let it immediately address and you continuously address the way you think you are addressing it, then people are not convinced. Dale Carnegie once said, if you convince a person against their will, they will hold the same opinion still. It's in How to Influence and Influence People, one of the leadership approaches, he says. And so if you don't address them soon enough, then they form groups. Now you have to convince more than one person, because even if that one person is convinced, the other members in the group will not be convinced. And so your problems have now become more exponentially more challenging. The resistance has become more challenging. So I'll give you one quick example. A long time back, I'm going at least 25 years back in my career at this point. There was a very good example of what you were just talking about. There was a big major change. One of the important things that we have to do as part of our organization was to deliver timely and accurate invoices to all our customers. I was part of the group where I was leading the charge and stuff like that. And there were two developers who were basically coming and saying, like, I would like to address this particular problem because I'm not focusing on how you do it, right? Like, I'm trying to say this needs to be done. This is the time frame. So if you look at all those things, I've given you the scope, I've identified the stakeholders, I have given the responsibilities, I have put the timeline, all these things I have done. But the important thing is two people were approaching it from different ways. Now, one person came and said, I would like to use a program to actually do this in memory. The other person came and said, I would like to, do this on the database because all the data is in the database. It makes sense to get the work done by the database. Which is the right approach? Both are right approaches. Now, I could communicate multiple times, but communication, in my humble opinion, is a one-way street. In my book on organized common sense, I basically say communication is not about what you said, but what the other person understood. Now, if I came and said, hey, do it this way because this is how I want to do it, the other person is going to say, this person prefers that individual over me. So you're not convincing that person. You're not getting the people to buy in. And now you are creating only, partitions and, groups and, creating breeding grounds for potential problems to continue. Instead, what I did is, let's go and hear both of you out. And I will also bring a third party, a mediator, somebody who does not know, all the previous discussion that we have had. Let's talk about this. One person came and presented, this is how I want to approach it. Good, no problem. I listened to you. Now, the second person came and said, this is how I'm going to present it. Good. Now I put the project requirements in front of them, which will be given, releasing the information to the customers fast. What kind of risks that I'm actually, communicating. So, I remember I said change management is a response to risk, right? If you look at here, we didn't identify risk, but if you take risk element out, nothing will work. Change has risk, stakeholders have risk, responsibilities have risk, timeline has risk, budget has a risk, communication is a risk, training and support. Jennifer, she was very nice in saying, like, people miss out the training here. Many times training is even, a second, not even a second or a third or a fourth thought. and measuring the wrong one to measure, like number of lines of code, number of people you meet and stuff like that. That's not an indication of success. So I went and said, let's make sure that you two are talking to these constraints, these assumptions from a project side. It's not about you guys anymore. It's about, like, what your value is to this particular project and to our customers. And one person who came back and said, I want to go only with my approach, said, oh, my approach will take at least 2 weeks, whereas his approach will be done in less than a week. So if timing is of importance, and if the value needs to be immediately given to the customer, I would put my thought process on the back burner and do this the other guy's way. Now, did I convince any one of them? No. Did each one of them actually support each other? Yes. Now, that is leading change.
Yeah, and it seems like I mean, communication definitely gets kind of at the bottom of everything. If there's not communication throughout the whole process, then you're going to have, like you said, there's going to be risks in every single stage. So those definitely need to be addressed. I think we could talk about these stages and kind of the myriad of challenges that organizations face for a long time, but for sake of time, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So I'd love to talk about, we've talked up to this point about a change management plan and how it can be effective, defining the scope of the stakeholder and training. So Jennifer, I'm hoping that you can walk us through kind of a more real life example where these strategies were applied and how it demonstrated the importance of a well-structured change management plan.
Yeah, so we can go with the example of new system implementation. So, and I'll speak from experience with this one specifically. I was brought in on a project to redo a go live that didn't go so well. The go live was not successful, and so there was a retrospective that was done to realize, what could we have done better, what went well, what didn't work well, typical retrospective. And so there was the thought about some of the findings were training, of course. So that's why I keep harping about training, because people were not prepared for the new system implementation with really adopting and understanding and comprehending how this new system was going to help them in their role and their job to do their function a lot better. There wasn't much knowledge transfer between resources that we found. The design did not mirror what was expected in the new system as well. And then testing was not thoroughly completed once the design was finished. So those are just a few known findings that we harped on. And also, if you've implemented any type of system, right, when you start testing, you have issues and defects that you begin tracking, right? And then we just had so many open defects and we still decided to go live. So, okay. So now we know that wasn't the right thing to do. So we use change management to come back to the table, look at from the retrospective, do we have people in the right seats? Did they understand the data that was in the new system, right? Master data, customer data, item data, location data, transactional data, right? There's lots of facets of data in this system. Were the right processes linked during design, right? That was one of the design challenges that we encountered, as well as there was even a thought all the way back to the beginning. Did we select the right technology? So remember, I talked about there should be some type of data collection, data observation, which we call the discovery process, especially when you're looking to implement a new solution or a new technology or even a new process. You want to go through some type of acceptance criteria to analyze what's important to us as an organization. Does this meet our needs? And I always encourage our clients here at the MJW Group to get other opinions of other customers, right? That the software vendor, or if they've used this process, get their opinion of how that new technology is working for them, right? Because we always want to do business with people we know, like, and trust, right? And if the customer can find other success stories that, that vendor has done, of course, they're going to want to, work with that solutions vendor and partner. So we looked at change management. Obviously, we created a effective communication strategy, and we socialized that beyond just IT. And in this case, this system was a warehouse management system. So we socialized the change management plan beyond supply chain, beyond the warehouse, and beyond just IT, right? Because we had to get more buy-in with bespoke functions that the change was impacting. So think about finance, right? Think about someone in inventory control. Think about someone in procurement and planning. How does this new technology implement their world? Not just the ones that were, executing the implementation, but everyone else that may be involved, because it does affect them. So of course we looked into, like I mentioned on the other slides, like who are the stakeholders, who is the core team, who is going to be that resource backup and contingency, and actually creating an organizational chart, because believe it or not, there was a lot of well, I thought this person was doing that. Well, I thought that person was doing that. And in the PM world, that could have been solved with a RACI and an org chart. So it's very clear and articulated on, who's doing what when it comes to process ownership, and making sure everyone understands who to go to when you need to escalate issues. And I mentioned before, we included, those bespoke functional areas, but we also reached out to our customers that were impacted, as well as external vendors and other business partners. So we made sure everyone was included in this change that needed to know about it, because there may be things on their end. Think about a vendor or another third-party vendor or someone more downstream, and you're changing out a system, right, that normally talks to their systems and communicate to them. So this is a huge change for them, because if a link is broke, or they don't know that this change is coming with a new system implementation, you can imagine they just come in one day and nothing works. And believe it or not, a lot of people don't think about, outside of their four walls, who else would this change impact? And making sure all linkages have connections and thoroughly tested and validated. We also looked at different ways of a management plan when it came to ownership. So I mentioned about process ownership, but what about a risk mitigation? What about escalating, developing a war room if we have issues immediately that we need to fix? So just looking at different ways of mitigating the risk ahead of time was key as well. So as we went into this redesign, here on the bottom, I kind of gave a pictorial of how the change management plan influenced the overall project plan. When we came back and created the schedule for it, we looked at bringing in different resources in the beginning. We extended the design timeline, so we gave ourselves some more time to really design and thoroughly make sure all processes were linked together. Development took a longer schedule for us to come in and thoroughly make sure that the code was reliable, dependable, and again, linking all the processes together. And then testing, we gave ourselves a longer testing timeline, since these were some of the findings that we noticed out of the retrospective that we considered wasn't successful at all. So we extended our timeline and making sure we had those three things. I would say, well, 4 resources, design, development, testing was key. Then when we got close to being done with testing, we started bringing in trainers. So we did train a trainer exercise to ensure that, not only the core team that has been, in the trenches since day one understood what needed to happen, but they had the knowledge to transfer it now to their immediate teams themselves, right? And the core project team can focus on getting ready for go live. So go live came, and we looked at, of course, a go live checklist, right? Our cutovers, making sure the cutover was where it needed to be. And really just, I would say for us, it was really documenting all of these aspects that I'm mentioning and putting it in a place, believe it or not, where everyone on the team could access it, and also making it visible whenever we met. So that way, everyone had access to the schedule. They saw exactly where we were at all times. They were able to ask questions. They were able to challenge what was happening at the time. We allowed a safe space, right, for that, for those learnings, mistakes, and just trial by error to happen. So it may seem simple what I'm saying, and in reality it should be, but believe it or not, many organizations, if they're not very structured when it comes to, I would say, project management or program management, then leading and delivering change is going to be very difficult, because you have to have a vehicle that is driving that. And that's why, as I alluded to earlier, a lot of times your facilitators or change managers and PMs, they know what questions to ask. They know how to stir the pot, rather, to get everyone going in the right direction and thinking about things that they may not normally think about. So for us with this change and just going about it a different way and allowing more time for design development, getting the right resources on the team, it allowed us to increase the knowledge transfer when we were developing training materials. It allowed us to redesign a lot better and work through exceptions and scenarios that we didn't think about before. And it also allowed us to manage our data migrations and data setup between customer and vendor a lot better than we did before. So it was an overall successful project to get to the end goal, and the users adopting this new technology a lot more better than what we did in the past.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that kind of specific example, especially how you had to kind of adapt your strategy if it didn't work the first time, extend the timelines and kind of, figure out the best way to get there, to get to the end goal. I think what is so often hard for organizations is failure and learning to adapt,
Mhm.
and to better the strategy rather than just get down, because, all of us fail and you got to get back up and try again. So sure, I'd love to know from your experience how companies can use lessons from past failures to prevent similar issues in future change management efforts.
Definitely, that's a very good question, Audrey. I can talk for hours on that, but I have to, keep my focus here. So I'll give you some thoughts over here. So when it comes to failures, failure is going to give you a lot of important lessons if only people pay attention to it. And we need to learn from that mistake. What's the point in having a lessons learned register, which is creating nothing but a digital waste as a document in a repository? What's the point in having a retrospective and there is no action item coming out of this? And even in people that are following the newer ways of working, like adaptive and agile and changed approaches and stuff like that, they keep telling fail fast. Agile doesn't come and say fail fast. We keep telling fail forward, which means learn from those mistakes so that you will not repeat the same mistake. And it's okay to have a new mistake, with different context and stuff like that. But you need to learn from the mistake and adapt and do things like that. But at the same time, don't focus only on the failure alone, because your success could have been accidental. You think like, oh my God, I'm so great. This project went very well. Maybe, or, the North Star aligned so perfectly at that point that you were able to succeed. You should be spending time on both failure and success equally, learning from those things, and then try to actually make sure that you are not focusing on your success and your failure, but also on your team's failure, your organization's failure, your industry's failure, and you need to learn from all of them. And this is one of the reasons why I keep telling, like, you need to be going to the conferences, you need to be going to the chapter meetings or, product different meetings and stuff like that, so that you learn. One of the things that as a project management office vice president of the PMO that I was leading, one of my very first question that I ask people when they come for an interview with me is, what is the latest book you read on your profession? What is the latest webinar or conference that you attended, and what lessons did you learn from that? And if that doesn't cut through, there's no point in whether you have a PMP certifications or not. You are now becoming more academic in your thought process, even though you are a practitioner. So I do come up with a few things that I have come up in terms of my experience. One is define strategy, but also continuously refine strategy. Define and refine. That needs to be part of your equal vocabulary. And take for instance examples of Motorola. they were once upon a time wonderfully competing in the marketplace of an analog cellular phone. But they thought like, oh, I'm fine, we don't need to do anything. They were not looking at what's happening in the world, and digital cellular technology came and Nokia came from just wipe them out completely. Now they are nowhere. When you think of a cellular phone, you don't think of Motorola. But once upon a time, they were the biggest thing. So define and refine constantly. So you need to have those feelers. The second thing is, don't become too stiff. Be adaptive, be nimble, pivot accordingly. So you need to start looking at all those things, but then bring them back to you. So in my PMO organization, I used to have knowledge sharing sessions where I will bring people from external vendors and they will attend these things. Then I will turn around and ask, now that you have heard this, what are you going to do differently? So you need to come up with a pivotal action every day. Every day, don't count the days, but make the days count.
Yeah.
Right?
Are full of good sayings. I love it.
It's in my book. It's in my book as well. Now, the third thing is communication. As I mentioned to you, it's a one-way street, but collaboration is a two-way street. That's the reason why we say push communication, pull communication, and all those things. The best communication is going to be interactive communication. Why? Because more than 55 to 65% of all the communication understood is through nonverbal communication. There's no point in having a wonderful document. There's no point in actually sending those emails because nobody reads those emails. Nobody understands those things. And so we need to make sure that we are on a collaboration street. Yes, collaboration leverages communication, but focus is on collaboration, making sure that people are able to do this. And that collaboration was a big failure when you take a look at Netflix and Blockbuster. Netflix once upon a time was not able to survive, and they went to Blockbuster and said, hey, can you buy me? We are not able to sustain. And Blockbuster said, we don't want to communicate with you guys because we are so invincible. We are in the market and, stuff like that. And we don't see a model for you. Your business model is not sustainable. So did we learn? Now, who are you thinking of when it comes to video streaming? Blockbuster or Netflix?
Netflix.
Right? Netflix, right? So not falling forward. Not failing forward repeatedly. Go and attend all these things and bring those things back. What did I do today? What am I doing differently? What can the team do differently and stuff like that? Nothing is going to be so prescriptive. We talked about the change management model, and I really love what Jennifer was mentioning, because it's not like prescriptive. You can't go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and say, okay, I put a check mark on all of them. I'm good. I should be successful. No, it is not, because context counts. Everything is customizable based upon the context of the organization. What works in one part of the organization will not work in other part of the organization. Yeah. The important element of change management is emotional intelligence. So we need to understand three important things, which is going to be how people make decisions using hands, how people make decisions through using heart, how people make decisions through head. If you only come with a head, or if you only come with a hand, they will not understand this, but you need to bring that heart into the equation. So communication should be feeding into the heart repeatedly, not necessarily giving the logical diagrams and stuff like that. Yes, it is important, but people don't make decisions based upon logic or hands, but they make decisions based upon heart. So you need to focus on those elements. And last but not the least, change means you are creating a new way of living. Change means you are creating a new culture. When I'm saying like, I would like to have agile introduced in this organization, I'm creating a new culture. The culture is changing. When two companies, company A and company B, are actually merging, it's not company A's culture or company B's culture. It is going to be a conglomerate of a different culture. So you need to start looking at that culture aspects of it, because culture eats strategy for breakfast. All the things that you are saying, it's going to be gone. Culture eats like that, within a second. So we need to start understanding these elements. So these things are very easy to understand, but very difficult to actually implement. How do we do this? We have to go and do all these things. This is when I really like that ADKAR model. The awareness is nothing but a sense of urgency. As a CEO, you will come up with that awareness, which means you are actually creating a sense of urgency, which is why we are constantly responding to risk or issue. So we really have to internalize, what does this failure mean? And how do I make sure that I communicate that thought process throughout the organization so that every one individual in the organization is actually believing that thought process? Otherwise, you're not going to be able to succeed. So that is the root cause of why people should be learning from failure and successes equally well.
Absolutely. Failing forward. I love that. Really gets at the essence of it. I know we're, running a little bit out of time here, so I might skip quickly through this slide, but I think what you were saying, Sriram, about kind of always being aware of new industry trends, looking out for resources, looking at your competitors and seeing what they're using is really important to change. As you look for the ways to better your organization and to make things a little more seamless and effortless. So I think we're going to go on to the last topic, which is a little bit about Inflectra tools. And I was hoping that we could have a quick discussion on how Inflectra's tools specifically might help companies manage change effectively. And if there's a real life use case we can quickly discuss as well, that would be great. But let's start with the first part. How can our tools kind of help companies manage change effectively?
Am I the
start?
one? Okay.
Yeah,
all right, okay.
take it away.
All right, so I'll give you a couple of different ideas. One, as I mentioned, I was a client of Inflectra a long time back. I was trying to implement program management office, which is a change. Introducing a program management office within the organization is a change, and we are 500 plus members at that particular point with several clients. And at any point in time, there were about 50 to 60 different projects constantly in movement, and 50 different project managers was reporting into me. So managing the program management office was a real difficulty, right? So I brought Spira team at that point, because why? We need to have different sets of requirements, client-driven projects versus internal projects. Some more platform-oriented, some more future-oriented, some more corrective actions that we need to do. So many different types of products and projects existed. As a result of that, I basically said, I need a tool. And many times people, go to the comfort zone factor. Like, I'm using this particular tool, like a Jira or Trello or, Asana and stuff like that. I'm not saying, good or bad about those tools, but they are not project management tools. They are more like task management tool. They do one thing nicely, but they don't do all things nicely. But when I look at the Spira ecosystem, it is more like application lifecycle management. I need to manage this application from beginning till end with several types of requirements from different stakeholders. I need to be able to identify multiple types of risks. I need to be able to identify what are the different test cases associated with that and the documents. So many different pieces. Not everybody looks at the same way in that particular angle. So when I introduced the program management office within this, I basically said, okay, here is our ecosystem. We'll create templates of how a medical alert should look like, how a medical email campaign should look like, how detailed communication to a HCP should look like. And these are all, different types of test cases, different types of requirements. We have them. And then for new product initiatives, we had a different set of products where, the business analyst was coming up with all those kinds of requirements. So we had different places where the requirements could be tracked and could be flushed out in much depth as we continue to move forward. So the detail appropriately, the emergent, the estimable, the prioritized, all those thought process really came into play there. And then we were able to have test cases. And so different people were able to say, my product is successful because of these elements. So I was able to track the test cases. I was able to track the defects. I was able to triage them completely correctly, all in one system, not moving from, I will do this in Excel. I will do that in a paper document. I will do that in Microsoft Project Schedule. I will do something else in Jira. So now what is the single source of truth? So I got all these things into the Spira team. And whenever the CEO or the president of the organization needed to make a decision on what products are doing, go to one dashboard. I don't need to do anything. you have access to the same thing that me as a project manager or somebody else in down the system has, whether a tester or a developer or a system analyst or a project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, whoever it is. Everybody has access to the same ecosystem. It worked very well. So it was very successful. And as part of that, I used to come to, Inflectra and say, as a client of Inflectra, I used to, change the way, the product was even designed. So I was providing some, free intel and stuff like that. Now, another client over there is the, banking, financial, insurance services client. So this was one of our own client. I won't name the client. But they were into all these elements. They were not just banking, they were having banking element, they were also having some investment element and insurance element and multiple things over there. So each one of them were talking differently, but there are different teams. But the CEO of the organization wanted to say, how am I doing in this whole organization? But I'm not looking at banking. I'm not looking at financial services. I'm not looking at insurance alone. I want to look at all of them at the same time and then be able to drill down or roll up as the need arises. So within a banking thing, I want to go down and take a look at a banking app versus the responsive website, or a loan application process versus a mortgage application process. Which insurance services are doing very well, which is not. Why? And they were able to come and take a look at this and say, so many requirements are here, so many people are here, and now that many number of people are not moving forward and stuff like that. And initially, going back to one of the points that Jennifer was mentioning, we had the product, people purchase the product. So the tool doesn't do the work, but it's only the people that do the work. But they do the work through the tool. So they need to spend time and money on the training. And if you don't understand the tool is. You can have the best Lexus on your, or Lamborghini, I love Lamborghini, Lamborghini on your parking lot. But if you don't drive it, it doesn't do any work, right? The same way, the tool is not going to solve the problem, but you need to be able to train the people to do the work. I went there and I looked at the things, like, you guys are not doing this. Why are you having a Lamborghini but not using it at all? And they said, like, what do you mean? We can do this? All right, let me give you a training here. In one day, I was able to actually convert their entire application process into this equation. I said, like, you have the access now, so go ahead and have fun. So two different examples from two different industries. But again, it comes back to internalizing this, having the access to the right tool, and making sure that you use the right tool the right way and give them the right, love and training and support and stuff like that. Once you do that, you are able to accomplish this. And Inflectra support system is very good. Inflectra case study and Inflectra tools are very good in that aspect. And I have not talked about Rapis, Chronodesk, and all those elements because I'm just fitting to one element in the interest of time.
Maybe we need a part 2.
We need a part.
Cover it all. All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Sriram. That was great. So with that being said, I know we're running up on the hour here. Jennifer, if you have any additional thoughts to wrap things up.
Yeah, I think we've touched on all of these during our time here in the webinar. Dr. Sriram has reiterated several times about mitigating risk, right? Utilizing the change to mitigate the risk. And I would say that's why I have this listed last. It's one of the most important elements that we need to make sure we identify and address risks that are associated with the change. To reduce the likelihood of project failures. We just talked about that. And then other negative impacts on the organization. That example that I gave, I mean, if you can imagine a go live of that magnitude of an enterprise solution failing and then having to do it again. So the culture, like Dr. Sriram mentioned about, like, the culture had to be nurtured and somewhat revitalized to want to go through a change like that. The people involved are the ones driving that change. All the tools and everything that we utilize, they help us get there. But the people have to be very strong and willing and resilient to go through change. It's not easy, like we've been saying, but it's very rewarding to plan it, go through it, execute it, and come out on the other side.
Absolutely. Well, I'll finish with this ending slide and kind of wrap things up. I want to thank you both, Jennifer and Sriram, for joining today's webinar and sharing your expertise on the subject. I think change management is definitely a complex thing, and we've kind of only dipped our toes into the water. So if you are interested in reaching out and talking more about change management or any of the key concepts that we learned today, we have the information right here. Feel free to reach out to Jennifer or Sriram as well. And we're here to support you guys. Thank you again for watching the video, and thanks again, Jennifer and Sriram, for participating.